Friday, the 16th of March 2012, 7:12 a.m. 15-year-old Sierra LaMar had been getting ready for school when she had taken this picture on her MacBook Pro. It would be the last known picture of Sierra LaMar alive. Sierra's mother had already left for work just over an hour earlier at 6 a.m, but her mother had made sure to stop by Sierra's room to say, "I love you." Just as any other day that had come before it, Sierra had gotten out of bed, opened up her MacBook Pro, and had logged into her Tumblr account by 6:25 a.m. And at 6:29 a.m, Sierra had logged onto her Twitter account and had retweeted a few tweets. At 7:05 a.m, she had received a text message to her phone from her friend Carissa, which read, quote, "Could you bring your stuff for me?" At 7:11 a.m, Sierra replied back to Carissa, texting back, quote, "Yeah." Sierra had agreed to bring makeup in for Carissa to borrow. She and Carissa had made tentative plans to hang out with one another after school that day, though Sierra would never show up to school that day. The school bus driver would later verify that Sierra had not been at the bus stop on the corner of Palm and Doherty Avenue, where she would usually be picked up from between 7:30 a.m. and 7:35 a.m. on most school mornings. Sierra's friends in Morgan Hill also noted that she hadn't shown up that day. Her best friend Shanna, who was Sierra's friend from Fremont, where she had lived up until October of 2011, had been unable to think of anything that could have led Sierra to abandon her entire family and all of her friends in both Fremont and Morgan Hill. In fact, there had been no indication from her mother or any of her close friends that Sierra had been in the kind of distress that could push her to abandon all of her relationships and just run away. Nobody in Sierra's family and none of her friends had seen or heard from Sierra since she had taken that photo on her MacBook Pro in the early morning hours of March 16th, 2012. Sierra had no driver's license, she didn't have a job, she didn't have a credit card, and she didn't have a bank account. She had no other source of money or transportation apart from that of her parents. And her constant online presence on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and text messages all stopped at the same time in the early morning hours of March 16th, 2012. Her cell phone didn't send any more text messages after 7:11 a.m, with her last activity on her Twitter account being at 6:29 a.m. There had also been no further activity on her Tumblr account. Analysis of Sierra's social media accounts and phone revealed there to have been no evidence that she had intended to miss school that day. Sierra, like many her age, had been very attached to her phone, and when she wasn't using social media, she'd use her phone to listen to music, which was why it was very concerning that at around 6:44 p.m. on Saturday the 12th of March 2012, Sierra's cell phone had been found lying in an open field a few blocks away from her home. And given its proximity to the road and due to the fact that there had been no nearby tracks, it was suggested that the phone had been thrown from a passing car. On Sunday the 18th of March 2012 at about 1:17 p.m, a bag containing Sierra's clothing was located. It had been found a few miles away from her house, hidden in some cactus near a shed on a plot of farmland. Inside the bag was located a black Sharks sweatshirt with the name Stonehouse on the back, a bra, underwear, shoes, socks, jeans, and a purse that contained makeup and the $5 which she was given every day to buy her lunch with. As a side note, Brittany Stonehouse, who the Stonehouse sweatshirt belonged to, had lent Sierra the sweatshirt to wear to school on that same Friday that Sierra went missing. When this sweatshirt had been recovered, it was found to have been stained with mud and dirt around the entire back waist area. The rear of Sierra's jeans and the top of her underwear were also found to have been stained with what appeared to the investigators to have been dirt or mud. A criminalist at the Santa Clara County Crime Lab called Melissa Dupay tape-lifted small round glass beads off the back of Sierra's jeans, underwear, and sweatshirt, which were consistent with the reflective beads that were added to road paint used in Santa Clara County. To this criminalist and to the investigators, it appeared that Sierra had been dragged by her feet along the ground where her clothing had picked up dirt and road debris, with her purse presenting with similar markings. Sierra's jeans were examined extensively by criminalist Michelle Ebert. She noticed that there had been a strong odor of urine on Sierra's jeans, and Santa Clara County Sheriff's Sergeant Brian Randall had also noted that the jeans had smelled like human urine. Samples, which were called cuttings in the court records, were taken from the jeans for the purpose of DNA analysis. DNA analysis was conducted on a multitude of these samples, but the most useful to the investigation had been cuttings from the areas of the rear of her jeans marked Area 5, 12, and 13. From these samples, a, quote, possible major contributor was identified to have been Sierra, which is to be expected. Area 5 showed a mixture of DNA from at least 3 individuals, Sierra, a unknown individual, and a third unknown individual. Area 12 showed a mixture of DNA from at least 2 individuals, Sierra and an unknown individual, which is the same DNA profile as the first unknown individual in the Area 5 sample, if that makes sense. So that same unknown person's DNA was present in both samples. And Area 13 showed a mixture of DNA from at least 3 individuals, with Sierra and this same unknown individual being included. The profile of the DNA of the unknown individual was entered into CODIS, which is the FBI database that stores DNA profiles created by federal, state, and local crime labs in the US, and can be used by criminologists to assist in the identification of crime suspects. A search of the database identified a strong association between the foreign DNA from Sierra's clothing and the DNA profile of a man called Antolin Garcia Torres. And on the 28th of March 2012, the investigators were notified of this potential suspect. Antolin had lived approximately 7 miles away from Sierra's home and drove a 1998 VW Jetta. A subsequent records search showed that in June of 2012, Antolin was arrested by Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office for battery causing serious bodily harm, and it's believed that this felony arrest had been why his profile had been in the CODIS database. Now, it must be noted that those charges were later dismissed, quotes, in the interest of justice. There's not too much more information about that, on why that happened or anything like that, besides them saying it was dismissed, quotes, in the interest of justice. On Thursday, the 29th of March 2012, the Santa Clara County Sheriffs placed a GPS tracking device on Antolin Garcia Torres' car. Though it is important to note that within a day or two of this device being fitted to the vehicle, Antolin Garcia Torres found the tracker and subsequently removed it. On Wednesday, the 4th of April 2012, Sergeant Leon traveled to Antolin Garcia Torres' house to speak with him, and it was there that he conducted what would be the first of 2 interviews. Antolin explained to the investigators that he had no connection whatsoever to Sierra, and that he had only heard of her due to news reports about her disappearance being on the television, and had been true that by this point Sierra's disappearance and the progress of the investigation had been heavily covered by the media on television and on social media. The girlfriend of Antolin, a woman by the name of Francine, further corroborated Antolin's lack of any legitimate connection to Sierra or to anybody that Sierra knew. Hi everybody, Editing Josh here. Just quickly jumping in to say that Francine isn't really mentioned again, but the fact that she corroborates Antolin's story here and kind of covers for him is a bit suspicious, to say the least, as to what she may know. I know that she isn't prosecuted as far as I'm aware with regards to this case, so whether she genuinely didn't know anything or whether she was covering is up for debate, I guess, but I just thought that would be interesting to know, because I know some of you would have questions about that, so hopefully that clears that up for you. A few days later, on the 7th of April 2012, the authorities seized Antolin's red 1998 Jetta, which had a distinctive black hood in connection to Sierra's disappearance. And the subsequent search of Antolin's car actually provided several forensic links to Sierra and her disappearance. Sierra's hair and epithelial DNA, which is DNA collected from the buccal cavity, aka the mouth, were actually found in the red 1998 Volkswagen Jetta. In the trunk or boot of Antolin's car, there had been a rope, and on that rope had been a number of hairs. A full single-source DNA profile from one of those hairs revealed that it had been a match for the reference sample from Sierra. It had been Sierra's hair, and they had gotten this reference sample, by the way, just as a quick side note, from one of Sierra's hairbrushes. So it was a recent hair sample. It was a hairbrush that she'd used the morning she went missing. This search also located 2 pairs of gloves, cloth gloves, inside a pair of neoprene gloves. It's interesting to note that Antolin's girlfriend Francine had given him these cloth gloves for Christmas in 2011, and when they were analysed, the right cloth glove revealed a DNA mixture consistent with at least 3 individuals: Antolin, Francine, and Sierra LaMar. DNA and subsequent fiber analysis revealed there to have been even more information linking Sierra to the interior of Antolin's car, including his trunk. This was all despite the fact that Antolin had claimed he didn't know who Sierra was and had never had any contact with her. The armrest of the interior of the rear driver's side door yielded DNA consistent with that of Sierra. A criminalist from the Santa Clara County Crime Lab by the name of Trevor Gillies performed a fiber analysis on both Sierra's clothes and the interior of Antolin's car to see if there'd been any cross-transfer of fibers between the two. The interior of Antolin's car had distinctive black aftermarket floor mats with red trim, and fibers with the same size, shape, colour and other optical properties as these mats were tape lifted from the, quote, Stonehouse sweatshirt and from Sierra's jeans, so from the sweatshirt that she had borrowed and used on the day she went missing. Fibers that were indistinguishable from the grey carpeting of Antolin's car were also tape lifted from the Stonehouse sweatshirt, Sierra's jeans, and her left shoe. The trunk mat that was the apparent source of the fibers on Sierra's jeans, sweatshirt, and left shoe was also found to have a stain with Antolin's sperm on it. The rope that had been found to have Sierra's hair on it had been resting on top of this mat before it had been removed. 3 days after the authorities had first contacted Antolin, and about a week after he had found the GPS tracker that had been placed on his car, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's deputies served search warrants on Antolin's home and his car. Antolin voluntarily went with these detectives to the station to be interviewed, and even with his willingness to be interviewed, Sergeant Leon ensured to read Antolin his Miranda rights, who proceeded to waive his rights and agreed to answer the questions. During this interview, Antolin was asked about how his fingerprints or DNA might have come into contact with Sierra, and Antolin actually volunteered up a story about his sperm. He told the authorities that his DNA might have come into contact with Sierra as he frequently masturbated in his car and would throw tissues containing his sperm out of his car window. It must be noted that at no point prior to this statement did the authorities, or anybody else for that matter, suggest to Antolin that his sperm or any of the sexual contact from him had been connected to Sierra's disappearance. He just sat down in that interview and confessed to the authorities that he bashed one out in the car and used to just throw the tissues out the window, presumably when he was driving around, which is kind of what he was trying to imply here. What the fuck? Forensic testing was conducted, and it did reveal the presence of 5 sperm cells on Sierra's genes, though DNA testing for the sperm cell fraction of these samples were inconclusive as to the source. Also, during this interview, Antolin was also asked about his whereabouts on the 16th of March 2012. Antolin told the authorities a very detailed response. He told them that he had left the RV park where he lived alone at around 7 to 7:10 a.m. to go fishing at the Chesbro Reservoir. Antolin then went on to say that he drove northbound of Monterey and took a turn on Palm Avenue, which just so happened to have been the minor street where Sierra's school bus would pick her up in the morning. The most direct route from Antolin's RV park to the reservoir would be to take Monterey north and turn left after approximately a mile. There are a multitude of additional points where Antolin could have turned left without going several miles out of his way to Palm, including Watsonville Road, West Edmondson Avenue, Dune Avenue, Lagasse Avenue, and Willow Springs. Video surveillance of Antolin's RV park showed his distinctive red Jetta leaving the park at around 7 a.m. on the 16th of March 2012. Antolin's cell phone records from that day showed that his phone did not make or receive any text, calls, or internet activity until 12:49 p.m. that day. Surveillance footage from a Morgan Hill Bank of America showed Antolin arriving in his red Jetta at 12:50 p.m. Less than 3 days before Sierra went missing, Antolin's Safeway card was used to purchase 2 items: 1.42 gallons of Safeway bleach and a turkey baster at 11:35 p.m. on the 13th of March 2012. Despite the fact that the Safeway surveillance footage had not been working, bank video within the Safeway showed Antolin alone walking out with the items. Bleach is commonly used by law enforcement to clean up crime scenes and by the crime lab in order to properly sanitize work areas before each case. When Antolin was asked about this purchase, his girlfriend actually chuckled at the idea that he would buy such things without her, and a subsequent search of Antolin's home could not locate the bleach or the turkey baster. Sergeant Leon would later inform a grand jury that the reason he investigated those items had been because they could be used to, quote, clean up or sanitize a crime scene or a body. It must be noted that no evidence of chemical damage from bleach was located on Sierra's clothing, and it has not been determined to this day what Antolin did with the missing bleach and turkey baster. For the next 2 months following this first interview, the authorities followed Antolin 24 hours a day, and on the 21st of May 2012, the sheriff's office acted on the evidence at the time and arrested Antolin, who was subsequently taken into custody without incident in a Safeway parking lot in Morgan Hill. Antolin was then transported to the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office for questioning. He was given his Miranda rights at approximately 5:50 p.m. while in the car being transported to the sheriff's office. Before any questioning could commence, Antolin stated that he would not answer any questions without his attorney present. Now, it must be noted that prior to the interview taking place, it was determined that if Antolin did invoke his right to counsel or silence, that the California Supreme Court's ruling in People v. Richard Allen Davis would permit continued questioning in order to determine the whereabouts of Sierra. It was hoped that Antolin might reveal that Sierra was alive and that she could be rescued. In the case of the People v. Richard Allen Davis, the California Supreme Court authorized questioning outside of Miranda when, quote, "where the possibility of saving the life of a missing victim exists, non-coercive questions may be asked of a material witness in custody, even though answers to the question may incriminate the witness." And so, questions such as, where is she still alive, is she dead, were asked of Antolin on numerous occasions following his statements that he wouldn't answer questions without his legal counsel present. During the interview itself, it was made very clear to Antolin that he was being detained for the investigation into the whereabouts of Sierra LaMar. During a break in the interview, Antolin laid down on the floor and appeared to take a nap. Eventually he got up, dimmed the lights, and went back to sleep at around 8:43 p.m. At one point, the detective returned to the room and asked additional questions related to the whereabouts of Sierra, though after approximately 20 minutes of attempts to learn about the whereabouts of Sierra, they ceased additional questioning. Antolin was told that he was under arrest for the kidnap and murder of Sierra LaMar. While the authorities made arrangements for Antolin to be taken to the Santa Clara County Jail, Antolin laid down to nap inside the interview room and at one point even knocked on the door and asked officers in the hallway to keep the noise down. Now, there were 3 other cases that were connected, albeit potentially loosely, I guess, from this information I'm about to tell you about. There were 3 other cases that were connected to Antolin, which we are going to take a brief look at before going any further. The first case of which had been the attack of Cynthia Lundy at the Dunn Avenue Safeway in Morgan Hill. On the 19th of March 2009 at about 10:55 p.m, Cynthia Lundy had been walking to her car after shopping at the Dunn Avenue Safeway in Morgan Hill. She had parked in a well-lit area near 3 other cars, but when she had exited the store, the other cars had left and the parking lot had been mostly vacant. As Cynthia left the store, she scanned her surroundings and felt instantly unsettled when she saw a man wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt and dark pants, walking south through the parking lot towards the Safeway. As the man approached, Cynthia worried that he had been coming for her, and so she picked up her pace. It was then that the man started walking directly towards Cynthia, causing her to speed up to get to her car as quickly as she could. She managed to make it to her car, open the door, and lock the doors as quickly as possible. This saw the man, who had now been standing at her driver's side door, pulling on the driver's side door handle so hard that he actually lost his balance and fell backwards. And as the man fell, his hood slipped off of his face, and Cynthia saw the man's face in a side profile. Cynthia drove away and then contacted the authorities when she got home about the incident. Throughout the entire incident, the man didn't say a word to Cynthia and did not make any demands for her purse or of anything of any value. She estimated her attacker was about 5'10" tall, weighed about 200 pounds, and had been Hispanic. Cynthia remembered that the man's cheeks had been prominent and full, and that his eyes were round and brown. The most distinctive expression that Cynthia remembered had been the smirk that he had on his face. Cynthia would get chills when she saw the same smirk 3 years later when watching television footage of Antolin being placed in a patrol car. Cynthia did work with a sketch artist with the San Jose Police Department to create this sketch of her attacker. Now, the second case connected to Antolin actually occurred on the very same night as the attack on Cynthia, an attack on a woman called Annette Walters. Annette was attacked at the 235 Tennant Avenue Safeway location, which was located about 2 miles away from the Dunn Avenue Safeway. At around 11:20 p.m, Annette Walters had finished doing her shopping at Safeway and had walked back to her car. Using her wireless key fob to unlock her doors, She then sat down in the driver's seat, popped her purse in the front passenger seat, and put her keys in the ignition. As she began to turn the key in the ignition, a man got into her car from behind her and attempted to quote tase her in the back of her neck. Next, the man grabbed Annette's hair and pulled her closer to him, repeatedly trying to shock her in the neck. Annette asked the man what he wanted, and she offered to give him her jewelry, the money in her purse, and her car, specifically stating, quote, "If you want the car, take it." The man, though, did not respond to Annette, and in fact, did not say anything during the attack. Annette managed to lower the driver's side window and began to scream for help. The man held Annette down with his right hand and punched her in the face with his left. Annette tried punching the man back but ended up breaking her finger. Another person in a car a few spaces away flashed his high beams off and on in the direction of Annette's car, and in response, the man got out of the car and started running through the parking lot. Annette tried to follow him in her car, but she lost sight of him when the man was headed towards nearby train tracks. The sister of Antolin, a woman called Adriana, would later testify that Antolin could have used the train tracks to walk to work at the Tennant Avenue Safeway, where Annette was accosted. Annette did call 911, and a police officer from Morgan Hill was dispatched. This officer took Annette's statement and then searched the insides of her car. Annette described the man as wearing a black hooded sweatshirt that obscured his face and that he was wearing black jeans. She described him as being either Hispanic or, quote, a light-skinned African American, and he appeared young, either in his late teens or his 20s. Annette approximated his height to have been about 5'9". Behind the driver's seat near the floorboard, the officer located a black stun gun. This stun gun was analysed for fingerprints, and a comparison was made on the ridge detail found on a 9-volt Duracell battery inside the stun gun to determine that the impression on top of the word Duracell had been made by Antolin's left thumb. The Safeway club card records was reviewed and searched to see if Antolin's sister, Adriana's, club card had been used. It was found that at 4:20 p.m. on the 19th of March 2009, Adriana's Safeway club card was used in a cash transaction for a 2-pack of 9-volt Duracell batteries. These purchases and the records of Antolin's sister's club card usage were cross-referenced against Antolin's bank statements obtained by the police for March and April 2009. 2 out of the 8 club card purchases made on the 19th of March 2009 corresponded to charges on Antolin's debit card, but the other 6 purchases had been made with cash. Antolin's sister would later testify that she did not buy the Duracell batteries at the Safeway. 3 years later, Annette saw a television clip of Antolin in court, and she thought that he could be the person who attacked her because he had similar eyes, skin color, and hair color, though she said that Antolin looked heavier and more muscular than she remembered her attacker being in 2009. The third case connected to Antolin had been the attack of Eva Hernandez, which occurred exactly 1 week after the attacks on Annette and Cynthia on the 27th of March 2009 in a Safeway parking lot at the Dune Avenue Safeway. At approximately 8:30 p.m, Eva Hernandez drove to the Dune Avenue Safeway in Morgan Hill to get a sandwich. She parked her car in almost the exact same spot where Cynthia Lundy had parked her car the week before. When she reached over to the front passenger seat to get her purse, the rear driver's side door opened. A man then got into Eva's back seat and slammed the rear door shut. Eva immediately reached into her glove box and removed a folding knife that she kept there. The man grabbed Eva's hand and forced the knife open, putting the blade of the knife up to her neck. Eva was then unable to turn and see her attacker's face because when she tried to turn her head, he pressed the knife harder against her neck. The man then started punching Eva in the leg with his left hand, though fortunately, these left-handed punches had not been strong enough to leave any bruises on her leg. Eva tried to scream, but whenever she started to move her mouth, she felt more pressure on her neck from the knife. She broke down in tears, telling the man, quote, "Please don't do this," before telling the man that she was pregnant. It was at this point that the man let go of her hand, opened the rear door of the car, and ran away. Throughout this attack, Eva could only see the man's hand, some ink on part of his left hand, and that he'd been wearing a sweatshirt. Eva's attacker never said anything or made any attempt to take her purse from the center console. Though when the attacker stood up and left, Eva managed to get a better look at the man. She describes him as having, quote, light brown skin, weighing around 200 pounds, and being about 5'9" or 5'10" tall. Eva thought the man had been either Hispanic or, quote, light-skinned African American, and that his build seemed more bulky than muscular. The man had been wearing baggy dark pants and a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood up. Eva only managed to get a quick glance at the man's face, and she was unable to positively identify her attacker's face in the photo lineup she was shown 3 years later in 2012. Although she was unable to positively identify the tattoo she saw during the attack, It must be noted that Antolin did have tattoos on the inside of both of his forearms. Now, Cynthia had been able to successfully lock her attacker from entering her vehicle, but both Annette and Eva were attacked by a man who entered through the door immediately behind the driver's door while it was unlocked. And at no point during any of the 3 attacks did the man attempt to steal anything, nor did he say anything at all. All 3 women were attacked while alone in Safeway parking lots by a young man wearing a dark sweatshirt and dark pants. Video surveillance did not capture the attacks, as the man responsible selected victims outside the range of the east-west door cameras. In May of 2009, a booking photograph of Antolin showed him to have stood at 6 foot tall and weighing approximately 180 pounds, and having a description that was consistent with the descriptions given by all 3 women. You can see from the sketch made by Cynthia Lundy and a sketch artist, and the booking photograph taken 2 months after the Safeway attacks, that the 2 images are comparable with each other. And Antolin was accused of trying to kidnap these 3 women on the 13th of November 2012, though it must be noted that none of the 3 kidnapping victims were able to pick out Antolin Garcia Torres in a photo lineup, which, with the lineup taking place 3 years after the fact, is not surprising. In the Sierra LaMar case, Antolin Garcia Torres was brought before a judge in a hearing on the 13th of February 2014. In this hearing, Antolin pleaded not guilty. His attorney also sought to seal the grand jury transcript in an attempt to find flaws in the proceeding that could nullify the indictment. At this point in the trial, no decision had yet been made as to whether they would seek the death penalty for Antolin after he was charged with felony kidnap and murder charges. Sierra's parents had not been present in the courtroom during that hearing, but friends and volunteer search team members had been there in their place. It is important to note that Antolin had been charged with murder despite the fact that Sierra's body or a crime scene hadn't been found. Investigators state that the DNA evidence had been enough to proceed with the charges. A legal analyst by the name of Stephen Clark would state at the time of this hearing that the lack of a body may actually be a key strategy. Quote, "Until Sierra's body is found, they may take the approach that the DA or district attorney hasn't even proved that she's deceased. That's the first hurdle for the district attorney. And then they have to associate and prove that Antolin Garcia Torres is the one who killed her." On the 19th of May 2014, the Santa Clara County prosecutors on the case announced that they were seeking the death penalty against Antolin. One important question stood out at the time: if they hadn't yet found Sierra's body, how could they seek the death penalty in good faith? Let's take a look at a news clip from the time that discusses this.
Santa Clara County prosecutors say they will ask for the death penalty against this man, Antolin Garcia Torres. Investigators believe he kidnapped and murdered 15-year-old Sierra LaMar in 2012. Police have never found Sierra's body, so how will prosecutors proceed with the case anyway? ABC 7 News reporter David Louie is live tonight with that story. David?
Well, Dan, this will be a challenging case because, as you indicated, no body or crime scene has ever been discovered. Yet the district attorney's office believes it has a death penalty case. Seeking the death penalty for 22-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres carries some risk, according to legal analyst and San Jose attorney Steve Clark. Neither sheriff's deputies or an army of volunteers has ever found the body of 15-year-old Sierra LaMar, despite extensive searches that continue even now, 2 years after her disappearance.
There's been instances like J.C. Dugard and Elizabeth Smart, who were presumed to be dead but were later found alive. And you can believe that the defense is going to hammer that, and they're going to say that the DA's office is overreaching here. If there's a death verdict, that's a verdict that can never be fixed.
The district attorney's office polled members of the LaMar family to discuss the death penalty. Sierra's father said there was consensus it was the correct choice.
Over the last month or so, we've talked to the DA's office. And we've also talked as a family, and yeah, that's something that we decided we wanted them to pursue.
Volunteer search leaders expressed hope today that the death penalty might pressure Garcia Torres to give investigators details where Sierra LaMar's remains might be found.
There's a group of volunteers that have come together that have worked and supported the LaMar family for 2 years, and we consider ourselves extended family, and we will be there for them through the duration of the trial, no matter how long it takes.
The decision to seek the death penalty will also pose a challenge to impanel a jury that is fair-minded about capital punishment. Law professor Ellen Kreitzberg is a death penalty expert at Santa Clara University Law School.
Santa Clara County voted, more than 50% of the voters in the last election voted to abolish the death penalty in Santa Clara County. So it is a county that has expressed strong reservations for the death penalty as a general concept.
A hearing was proposed to be held on June 11, 2014 to set a trial date, but that was delayed until the 2nd of September 2015. But in the meantime, on the 14th of March 2015, Sierra's family announced that they believed the search efforts for Sierra's body had run its course, and that they would be ending the search.
We've exhausted our inventory of viable search areas.
With profound sadness, the family of Sierra LaMar participates in the last regularly scheduled search for the missing Morgan Hill teenager. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Marzullo. Sierra LaMar vanished 3 years ago, and this week her family, on the advice of experts, made the tough decision to stop searching for her every week. ABC 7 News reporter Leslie Brinkley is live at the Santa Clara County Jail in San Jose, where the man accused of kidnapping and killing Sierra is being held. Leslie.
That's right. The man in jail here accused of abducting Sierra LaMar may be the only person who knows where she is, as today her family launched one last desperate search.
All this time has passed. We're looking for effectively anything on the surface that is bones.
Dozens of volunteers fanned out in thick brush in northern Morgan Hill, territory that had never been searched before. 1,130 searches over the last 3 years. That's over 54,000 volunteer hours, culminating in this final walk.
3 years. This is like the longest search center that's been open in the U.S. Just because the weekly searches have been temporarily suspended, we will never, as a family, and just as the group, give up on the mission to find Sierra LaMar.
This man, Antolin Garcia Torres, is now in jail, awaiting trial for her abduction and killing.
He can end this agony for this family, to do whatever is necessary and whatever is required to get him to tell us where Sierra is.
We can't do enough. I wish we could have done more. I want to find her. We want to find her.
Once strangers, these volunteers are now like family, putting in years, week after week, in this search effort.
We're going to get this trial going, hopefully this year, and we'll hopefully find out where she is. I never give up. There's always hope.
If a new lead comes in, they say they'll be ready to go out yet again.
On the 2nd of September 2015, a trial date was set for the 25th of April 2016. This date was then delayed until January of 2017. The trial against Antolin commenced on the 30th of January 2017 in the Santa Clara County Courthouse in San Jose, and was, at the time, expected to last up to 5 months. On the 7th of February 2017, Marlene LaMar, who was Sierra's mother, gave her testimony. Let's take a look at the news coverage of this.
It was an emotional day in the murder trial of Antolin Garcia Torres, accused in the murder of Sierra LaMar 5 years ago. Sierra's mother took the stand today. ABC 7 News reporter David Louie was in the courtroom. He is live at the Hall of Justice in San Jose. David?
Well, Dan, it was a day of panic when the LaMar family realized that their daughter Sierra might have been abducted and was possibly dead. That was what the family had to relive today when Sierra's mother, Marlene, had to take the stand as a jury had to piece together puzzle parts of a very complex murder case. Sierra's mother, Marlene, and Sierra's older sister, Danielle, both were called to testify today, focusing on March 16, 2012, the day Sierra disappeared. From the stand, Mrs. LaMar told jurors her last contact with Sierra was when they hugged and said they loved each other, as Mrs. LaMar left for work, leaving it to Sierra to get dressed and get to the bus stop on her own on time. She texted Sierra twice that day to remind her to wipe up the tub and to check if she was visiting a friend after school, but there was no response. Sierra also didn't respond to calls. The jury then listened to the 911 call to report Sierra missing.
I can't imagine going through that particular day all over again, reliving it, hearing the recording. She's being extremely strong.
Marlene LaMar was also shown clothing and other items later found in a bag. She confirmed they were Sierra's.
This clothing, the makeup, were her last mementos, and she can't even touch them. It's excruciating for absolutely everybody involved.
Sister Danielle confirmed Sierra was totally dependent on her parents and would never abandon her friends. Legal analyst Stephen Clark says, however, the defense at some point may try to raise some doubts, implying she ran away.
They want to establish that there could be things that Sierra's mother didn't know about her daughter, that there were things going on with her daughter that she would only share with her friends. But if the defense does not go lightly with this testimony. I think that could backfire.
On the 2nd of May 2017, the closing arguments were given in the trial.
This is the highest stakes case we have in our society.
The prosecution is close to wrapping up its closing arguments in the murder trial of Antolin Garcia Torres, accused of killing Sierra LaMar 5 years ago near Morgan Hill.
In a matter of days, a jury at this courthouse will decide whether or not Antolin Garcia Torres is guilty or not of killing Sierra LaMar. Even though Sierra disappeared 5 years ago, spectators in court found themselves reaching for tissues to wipe away tears that formed as they heard for one last time details of this troubling case. This is the last time for the prosecutor and the defense attorneys to convince the jury of Antolin Garcia Torres' innocence or guilt. The murder charge is based on circumstantial evidence because Sierra LaMar's body has never been found. But DNA evidence found on Sierra's genes has a high statistical probability of linking Garcia Torres. The defense disputed that claim. Sierra's father, Steve, maintained a daily presence in court. Her mother, Marlene, took the witness stand early in the trial. In court, they sat just a few feet from the man accused of killing Sierra, separated by a railing.
Obviously, this jury has seen Sierra LaMar's family in the courtroom. They've seen support for Mr. Garcia Torres, and they know that this is the highest stakes case we have in our society. It's a big burden on this jury.
The jury of 6 women and 6 men is expected to begin deliberations on Friday. The defense starts its closing argument Wednesday. Roger Nelson has been in court for most of the trial.
But ultimately, everybody would like to have the same result, and that is justice for Sierra and also the return of Sierra to her loving family.
The jury must decide if Garcia Torres is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Members of the volunteer search team who hoped to find Sierra or her remains still harbor bitterness.
To be in that position as a young girl like that, defenseless, and have this big monster on top of you, hurting you, it's frightening.
On the 4th of May 2017, after 4 months of testimony and arguments in the trial, the jury began their deliberations in the case. And on the 8th of May, the jury announced that they had reached a decision. This decision was announced on the 9th of May 2017.
Nothing will take away the pain and the sorrow that we experience every day, and we will continue to experience for the rest of our lives.
A family heartbroken but somewhat relieved after a guilty verdict for the man accused of killing 15-year-old Sierra LaMar.
It took just 2 days of deliberations for the jury to come to their decision. Antolin Garcia Torres was found guilty of first-degree murder, even though Sierra LaMar's body has never been found. He now faces the possibility of the death penalty.
Nearly 400 supporters joined the LaMar family here at the courthouse this morning to hear the verdict read in court. And this jury of 6 women and 6 men had deliberated, as you mentioned, a half-day Thursday, a half-day Friday, and all day yesterday, meaning they apparently had no difficulty in deciding whether Antolin Garcia Torres is guilty or not. The public gathered in the courtroom gasped as the clerk read the verdicts. Guilty of the first-degree murder of Sierra LaMar. Then 3 more guilty verdicts for the attempted kidnap of 3 adult women in grocery store parking lots in Morgan Hill 3 years before Sierra LaMar disappeared. It was the outcome that Sierra's parents said they had wanted. The family emerged from the courthouse willing to share the emotions for the first time after the 13-week trial.
We're grateful to the jurors coming up with the right decision. And it gives us peace as a family knowing that this is not going to happen to another child and that they can't get away with something like this.
Justice is served here for us today, justice for Sierra. And so that gives us some form of relief.
Joining them, Sierra's older sister Danielle, with tears in her eyes.
Obviously never get Sierra back, so it's not closure, but it is a good first step, and the jury did the right thing.
Antolin Garcia Torres was convicted of murder and kidnap, even though Sierra's body has never been found. The case relied heavily on DNA evidence.
We felt very confident about the evidence that we had. In 13 weeks of testimony, it's very difficult to say what is most compelling. It's a whole package.
The jury will convene next week to start the penalty phase. Garcia Torres could face life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty.
The penalty phase of the trial commenced on the 16th of May 2017, which was when the jury had to give their sentencing recommendations. On the 5th of June 2017, the jury unanimously gave their recommendation.
There is no joy in today's verdict.
Today, a jury decided the fate of a child murderer.
The Santa Clara County DA and Sierra LaMar's family were stunned that the same jury that convicted Antolin Garcia Torres of kidnapping and murdering Sierra then opted to spare his life.
And I saw in the courtroom you were kind of shaking your head as they read the verdict.
Yeah, like I said, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. The crime, I thought, deserved the maximum sentence, not the minimum.
26-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres will now face life in prison with no possibility of parole for the March 2012 kidnapping of then 15-year-old Sierra LaMar as she walked to school in Morgan Hill. He was found guilty last month of the first-degree murder, along with taser attacks and the attempted kidnapping of 3 other women. Sierra's disappearance drew hundreds of volunteers to search for her, but her body was never found. Garcia Torres' DNA was found on her jeans, and Sierra's DNA was detected in Torres' car and on his gloves. Garcia Torres' attorneys will be back in court, they say, to appeal the verdict in September, but the family hopes he has a change of heart.
In that cold-hearted murderer's heart, I call on him today to tell us where Sierra is so we can bring her home.
That's really something that would help us, in this grieving, to know what happened.
The angst will be in our lives forever. Nothing will ever take that away.
Sierra's mother says they're planning a memorial this summer to give them some closure.
We can only hope that even despite the LaMar family being disappointed in the sentencing that Antolin received, that they feel that justice has been served. It must be noted that Sierra's body has not yet been found as of this video being made. I hope that one day Sierra will be brought home and laid to rest. And that's everything that I have for you in this case. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can be notified every single time I post a brand new true crime video. If you prefer to listen to your true crime coverage, you can find all my cases over on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by just searching up True Crime with Joshua Miles. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next case.